Hello, my name's Carlton Collins. The other day I was having lunch with a friend of mine, Mike, and I was telling him a story that happened back in 1977, back when I was just 17 years old. I'm 64 now, it's 2024. But way back when I was a freshman in college at the University of Georgia, I was walking across campus and I saw a young man out in front of the Student Center. He was preaching. He stood up on a ledge. He had a Bible. He was shaking it at everybody. And he seemed to be passionately preaching about God. I waited till he was done. There was a break, and I asked him. I walked up to him, and I just said, "How do you know God is real?" And I thought that was a very fair question. I genuinely wanted to know what his answer was. And to my amazement, he shook his Bible at me in a screaming voice, "You're going to hell!" And he proceeded to tell me how wrong I was for just asking the question. And so my buddy Mike said, "Well, what were you expecting him to say?" And I said, "I don't know. There's got to be a better answer than you're going to hell." And I said, for example, I've thought about this for a long time, and I actually think that using mathematics, statistics, and probability in mathematics, you can kind of come up with a reasonable evidence that there is an intelligent creator behind the universe. And he wanted me to explain that. So I said, well, if you want me to, here we go. And I started talking to him about a deck of cards. I said, to get started with this concept, Mike, consider a deck of cards as 52 cards. And every time you shuffle that deck of cards, you put it into a unique order. But what a lot of people don't realize is you put it into a unique order that has probably never existed before in the history of the planet with any deck of cards ever, because there are so many different orders you can put a deck of cards in. I'll do it again. That deck of cards is now in a new order that has probably never been in that order before anywhere. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand or believe. But let's talk about it for just a little bit, because a deck of cards, it turns out, with 52 cards, you can calculate what the odds are that a deck of cards will occur in a specific order. It's 52 factorial. 52 times 51 times 50 times 49 and so on, all the way down to times 2. And that gives you a very large number. I've got it here on the screen. It's basically an 8 with 67 zeros behind it. And that's an incredibly large number. And it's such a big number that we have a hard time even comprehending how big that number is. So there's a story I found by a data scientist called Scott Seespel. And I'm going to tell you the story he came up with to explain 52 factorial, because I think it's a pretty good one anyway. So he starts off by saying, imagine that you stood on the equator of the Earth and you walked around the Earth waiting 1 billion a billion years between each step. So it takes about 80 million steps to go around the Earth. So if you took a step, waited a billion years, took another step, waited a billion years, and in 14 steps, there's the length of the universe right there since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. So it would take you that long just to go 14 steps. But in Scott's example, you walk all the way around the Earth, 80 million steps with a billion years between each step. And then let's suppose that when you finished walking around the Earth, you withdrew a drop of water out of the Pacific Ocean, and then you started again, walking around the Earth, billion years between each step, and then withdrawing a drop of water out of the Pacific Ocean again once you had completed the second lap around the Earth. And you would continue that over and over again. There are a lot of drops of water in the Pacific Ocean. I've got that number for you right here. What is that number? Let's see, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, quintillions, sextillions, septillions, 14 octillion drops of water in the Pacific Ocean. So you continue this until you've emptied the Pacific Ocean. Then imagine you take a sheet of paper like this and lay it on the ground and refill the Pacific Ocean and do the whole thing over again. all the way around the Earth, 1 billion years between each step, 80 million steps. Take a drop of water out of the ocean, go around the Earth again, take another drop of water out of the ocean, etc. It's when you've emptied the Pacific Ocean again, you take a second piece of paper and you put it on top. And you continue that whole process until you've built a stack of papers that reaches from the Earth to the sun, 93 million miles. Yes. Now, if you did that, imagining just now how big that is, how close do you think you would be from sitting through 52 factorial seconds? You wouldn't even be close. If you had put a stopwatch on when you started counting down 52 factorial seconds, you would only be 1/3000th of a way through 52 factorial seconds. You would in fact have to go through that whole process of walking around the Earth, withdrawing a drop of water from the Pacific Ocean, putting a piece of paper into a stack, stacking to the sun 3,000 times in order to have sat through 52 factorial seconds. That's how big 52 factorial is. And I'm telling you this because I need you to understand the math. A lot of people haven't contemplated really big mathematical numbers before, but this kind of helps because we've all shuffled a deck of cards and we've never thought, well, that deck is now in a unique order. But the reality is there's an excellent chance every time you shuffle a deck of cards, no deck of cards in the history has ever been in that order. It is technically possible, but it's improbable that that's the case. And so how many stacks, how many pieces of paper, I've got that calculated for you too. This is the number of sheets of paper it would take. Let's see, million, billion, trillion, 149 quadrillion pieces of paper it would take to stack from the Earth to the sun, which is an amazing number. And a lot of people don't think about that. Here's another thing to think about just in terms of thickness of paper. If you took a piece of paper like this one and you folded it once and you folded it twice and you folded it 3 times and you kept folding it until it was folded 50 times, it would reach from the Earth to the moon. And that's with 1 millimeter thickness paper. A lot of people just have never thought about that, but they can't even comprehend that be the case. But that's what it is. Now, the reason I wanted you to understand 52 factorial is because we can see it, we can visualize it. We know what a deck of cards is. We've held it in our hands before. But now let's jump up to a DNA strand. A DNA strand has not 52 bits of information in it. It has 3.1 billion bits of information in it. If you were to write in every bit of information in a DNA strand down on a card, for example, this would explain how the kidneys are formed. This would, the belly button is an innie or an outie. This one maybe the shape of the ears. This one would be the color of the eyes, the color of the hair, etc. We would come up with a stack of cards, not 52 cards thick, but 3.1 billion cards thick. And then to put those instructions in specific order of a DNA strand wouldn't be 52 factorial chances. It would take 1 in 3.1 billion factorial chances just for a DNA strand to form. If you had all of those, let's just say when the Big Bang happened, the explosion happened, and that it created the proteins needed to provide the information for a DNA strand. Let's just say that happened. It didn't, by the way, but let's just say it did. So all of these 3.1 billions information were floating around in the Big Bang. And in just to think that it is 13.8 billion years, they would somehow randomly arrange themselves into DNA strand order so it could make a perfect human being. It's an improbable number, so big our minds can't even comprehend how big that is. And of course, when the Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago, it wasn't even a case where we had all of this proteins formed and all the elements starting to form to build it. We're just talking about arranging it. Let's say it is formed and we're just arranging it. Is statistically pretty much impossible. And so that's where my mathematical side comes in. I'm a CPA by trade. Maybe I'm a little bit more mathematically inclined than other people. But I think there's some people who aren't mathematically inclined, who this would make no sense to them at all. I get that. But if you are and you're playing the odds, that's that's where you look at it and you have to go, there 13.8 billion years is a really short period of time for random chaos to organize itself randomly into something as elegant and designed as our universe, with galaxies and stars and planets and moons and living beings like us. It's just astronomically impossible to think that happened by chance. It couldn't have happened by chance. The odds are so big. So, probably a more elegant way to say it, there's a comedian named Pete Holmes, and he said it this way. He said, some people think that God created the universe, and some people think that nothing created the universe. Which guess is funnier? And I think that's a great way of putting it. Because while I admit it takes a leap of faith to think that God created the universe, it takes a much bigger leap of faith to think that nothing created the universe. And that's just a fact. So if you took a box, and let's just say you had a bag of white sand and a bag of black sand, and you poured them in the box together, one on one side and the other is on the other side, and you would see white and black sand. And then you shook it up and you looked in, you would see the black and white sand had actually mixed together. And then try to imagine that you just shook that box and looked at it and shook it and looked at it, and you were trying to shake it until the white sand came back onto one side and the black sand came on the other side. And you could shake that every second for 13.8 billion years, and it would never just randomly by chance, look, all the white crystals of sand on one side and all the black crystals of sand on the other side. That would never happen without some kind of intelligent person going through and pop, or intelligent being, and putting those and separating them out. It's technically it's possible because they're there and shaking them up. It's possible, but it's so improbable. It's really statistically impossible that would ever happen. And that's just talking about two bags of sand. Now let's take all the matter in the universe and let's pretend that just somehow, by chance, this big explosion occurred and it arranged itself just by chance into all the majesty you see today. If you study mathematics, and this is a big thing that influenced Einstein back when Hubble pointed his telescopes in the sky and figured out that if you used infrared color in your camera, you could tell whether objects were moving away from you or closer to you, towards you. He mapped out all the objects, a lot of the objects in the universe, and he was able to tell that everything was expanding from a central place. That's how we got the idea of the Big Bang. And Einstein was so enthralled by this in 1946, he went and met with Hubble, and he looked through Hubble's telescopes, and he recorded the same thing. He did the same calculations, and he confirmed that Hubble was right, that there was a Big Bang, that there was a big explosion that happened. And we can work backwards from where everything's coming from and go, everything came from a central location, and there was a big explosion. And what caused it is a good question, but I'm just going a little further and saying, now that we have this explosion of all this matter, how did it get organized into the things we see today in such a short period of time as 13.8 billion years without some intelligent designer behind it? And I would maintain there is an intelligent designer, and that intelligent designer is God. God may not be some man with a beard holding a trident sitting on a cloud. That's probably just our perception. Probably the truth is that the being known as God is someone we can't even comprehend or imagine. But that was my story to Mike, and Mike said, you ought to record that into a video and just share it with a few people and see what they have to say. So that way, I'll give that a try. So if you listen to this all the way through, thank you. I'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on this.